welcome to our meeting for the Public Safety Coordinating Council. Marcy, do we have a quorum?
We do, yes. Yes, we do.
Yes, we do.
Thank you. That was good, Danny. So we'll just go around and introduce ourselves. I'm Tina Fultz. I'm the chair for this meeting. And then Kiki, do you want to start and go around the table there, and then we can do online?
Sure. I'm Kiki Parker-Rose. I'm the Community Justice Director.
Jennifer Malenic, CASA, Jackson, and Jackson County.
I'm Travis Christian, Vice President of Adroit Construction.
Mike Benson, Lieutenant with OSP.
Josh Aldridge from the Sheriff's Office, I'm the jail commander. Randy Sparacino, Mayor of Medford.
Rick Dyer, County Commissioner.
Danny Jordan, County Administrator.
Stacy Brubaker, Department Director for Health and Human Services.
Nate Sickler, Sheriff.
Wendell Warren, Health Defender. Doug Engel, Public Defender.
Lee Ayers, Southern Oregon University.
Ruby Harriet, Jackson County DA's Office.
Joe Ferguson, Deputy Director for the Juvenile Division of Community Justice.
You guys in the back row want to go ahead?
I'm Jason Peterson. I'm the Emergency Manager for the Department of Veterans Affairs out in White City. Mike Parsons, Seven Point City Council, also Septic Wayne, Volunteer Coordinator for the Police Department.
Okay, Tina, that's everyone in the room. Do you want to go to the Zoom?
Yes, we can go to the Zoom. Gilda, do you want to start?
Sure, my name is Hilda Montenegro Fix, and I'm the CEO and founder of Celebrate Diversity.
Dave Carter, Southern Oregon University.
Rita Sullivan, I'm a psychologist.
Okay, I think that's all, Tina.
Okay. So thank you all for being here. Today is my last meeting as the chair. My term ends in June. Per the bylaws, the vice chair shall assume the chair of the following term. Officers are elected for a term of 2 years beginning the 1st of July, each odd-numbered year. So effective July 1, 2023, Kiki Parker-Rose will serve as the PSCC chair. That leaves her co-chair position or vice chair position open. Do we have any nominations from the floor for the vice chair?
I have a nomination. I'd like to nominate Josh Aldridge.
I'll second that.
Were you able to
That
get
was Daniel. And the sheriff?
Yes.
So the sheriff nominated and the second by Danny Jordan.
Correct. Is there any other nominations? Okay. So do we want to take a vote? All in favor of Captain Aldridge becoming the vice chair, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say no. Any abstain?
I'm abstaining from this vote.
You don't count, Captain Aldridge.
I'm surprised
Okay,
you
so
voted no.
Captain Aldridge is appointed as the vice chair beginning July 1 of 2023. Congratulations and thank you. There's also an announcement, and I'll let Kiki do the honors in person, but starting off, Doug Engel is resigning from the PSCC after 12 years. His official date ends June 30th of 2023, so he'll still vote today. But the Public Safety Council wanted to give him a plaque as a thank you for his service. He was appointed back in November of 2010, and I'll let Kiki say if there's anything else she wants to say.
We just want to thank you for your service to the Public Safety Coordinating Council. This plaque is for you for 12 years of dedicated service to the citizens of Jackson County through the local Public Safety Coordinating Council. Thank you very much. Did you want to say anything?
You rest his case.
So as part of that, we wanted to welcome Clint Oborn. He's been appointed by the presiding judge, Benjamin Bloom, and he'll serve as on the council, and he'll fulfill the public defender position beginning July 1 of 2023. And he'll begin voting in July. And we wanted to welcome Lieutenant Mike Benson from OSP. He's representing Oregon State Police as a non-voting member of the council. And then Barbara Johnson was approved by the commissioners and shall serve on the council as a representative of a community-based nonprofit organization that provides services to victims of crime. And then the next order of business is we need to approve the minutes for May. You all received them. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from May?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor to pass? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And any abstain?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, so the motions are adopted. The minutes are adopted, excuse me. And then next we have Kiki is going to present on the JRI budget amendment request.
So real quickly, I just want to let you know that we're winding down our 21-23 biennium. Justice reinvestment has been extended through December 31st to allow us to pay down the amount of money that was provided to us through justice reinvestment. And as part of that, we've made some internal changes to one position within our department. So that was a personnel services line item. The Pathfinders Network has moved into our resource center, taking over the majority of the duties that person was doing. And so we've moved that person into a different position within the department to help us close out pretrial, which is moving to the courts in July. And then that person also does our community service work, GPS, and home custody. With that, we have a balance in that line item of personnel services of $48,000. We'd like to reallocate that to a contractual agreement with Nathan Beard, who provides employment services for our population. And in order for us to do that through CJC, we have to bring it before this board, recommending a motion to approve, allowing the Board of Commissioners to actually approve the budget amendment moving forward, and then entering into a contract with Nathan Beard from July 1st, 2023 until December 1st, 2023, when our JRI funds will be expended. So, all that to say, I'm requesting a motion to approve the amendment for JRI funding to move from personnel services with JCCJ to contractual services.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed? And any abstain? Okay. So the motion passes for the recommendation to the Board of Commissioners. The last piece that we need to do before we jump into our presentation is we have several members who need to be reappointed. So we need a motion to recommend reappointment. We have to do them one at a time. And this is for reappointment to the Board of Commissioners for their approval. So the first member is Dr. Lee Ayers. We have a motion to continue her as reappointment.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any?
Did we ask her if she wants to continue?
They do.
Okay, good. All right.
Yeah, we reached out
Tina,
to everyone.
Tina, you muted yourself.
Thank you. Yes, Marcy reached out to everyone, was my understanding, and everyone on this list wanted to be reappointed. Do I have that correct, Marcy?
That is correct. Yes.
Thank you, Danny. The second person is Dr. David Carter to reappoint. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed?
Let's raise.
Any abstain? So the recommendation recommendation is to reappoint Dr. David Carter. That'll be sent to the Board of Commissioners. The third person is Rita Sullivan.
So moved.
Second. Oh, too slow.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? And next we have Jennifer Mylenick.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And does any abstain? Thank you. And Travis Christian,
So moved.
Oh, yeah, second.
and all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Thank you. And last is Nathan Olson,
So moved.
Second.
and all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And any abstain? Okay, that's everyone. Thank you very much. And then he's going to introduce our presenters for the juvenile justice in Jackson County.
So on the agenda today is a review and just some information about our juvenile justice system within Jackson County. We have Joe Ferguson, who is the Deputy Director with Jackson County Community Justice, Ruby from the District Attorney's Office, and is Robert Mountain is going to join us, that's right, from Zoom, and they've put together a presentation just to give us an idea of what's happening in the community with the juveniles. And I think are you also going to be able to touch on the fentanyl issues? Okay, awesome. So with that, Joe and Ruby, you're up. Thanks, Joe.
Yeah. Glad to see you're all having fun to begin with before my presentation. So it's make it a lot easier. Let's see if I can put it up. If you don't know where our building is, it's on 10th Street, down from the Catholic Church. When that building was built, now 19 years ago, coming up on 20, I think, in October, they tied it into the Catholic Church with the bricks. So it doesn't look like a detention facility, but that houses all our probation, our detention residential programs, the Oregon Youth Authority leases space in that building, and then we have 2 courtrooms and 2 juvenile court judges, all in that building. So it's served us well. It's to be a 100-year building, so none of us will be around in that 100 years, but hopefully somebody will see it as a 100-year building. I'm going to do probably most of the speaking, and Robert got the easy way off, says he has a meeting in Salem, so he's just going to do it by Zoom. So, and then Harriet's here, Ruby Harriet's to talk about our change in terms of the DA's office filing our petitions now, and where that's at, and how it's going, and kind of our process on those things. I had to make a new flow chart with the DA's office. So really there's 3 ways information comes to our department to deal with. The main one is that middle one where police reports go to the DA's office now. They're reviewed, and then they're provided to us if they meet legal mandates. Then we review them as our probation piece in terms of having an intake. Youth will start in detention at times where we don't get a police report right away. They're lodged on a fairly serious offense. We'll have a PC sheet most of the time, sometimes a police report. Again, the DA's office reviews that. We have to have a filed petition for court that is a little bit easier now. We've moved those to 1:15 in the afternoon, so it's not first thing in the morning. But again, that same process. And then violations, minor possessions, curfew, in the park after closure, excessive noise, all of those come directly to us. And so we review those. In reality, all the things other than MIPs of alcohol and marijuana or the 110 measurements get a parental action letter. There's really nothing we can do as You may be aware the last legislative session, they did away with all fines and fees for juveniles. So if you get a curfew, there's not a fine for that anymore. And so I'll walk through a little bit in terms of some of the processes as we continue to go through and what those means. But you can see there's arrows going all different ways because it really depends on if we have a youth that had a petition filed from the DA's office and we put them on a diversion agreement. If they fail that diversion agreement, that case then goes back to the DA's office to actually file the petition. And then we go back through the court system that way. So it does have a ebb and flow to it, definitely. And then things on the far right there is the Oregon Youth Authority pieces. So if youth continue through the system and need further out-of-home placement than the residential program that we have, they are committed to Oregon Youth Authority for those out-of-home placements, residential placements, or correctional facilities. And Robert will talk a little bit more about those as well. One thing that's a little unique with our county with our partnership with Oregon Youth Authority is when youth are committed to OYA for either residential or youth correctional facility, when they come back to our community, they remain with the Oregon Youth Authority under supervision. They don't come back to the county for supervision. That's just part of the agreement that we've had for years on that. And we'll talk a little bit about numbers and things as we go through this too. But there has been the change on the waiver process. So for ballot measure 11, it used to be where it fell to started in adult court. And if they didn't want to take them through that, they send them back to juvenile. Now it's reversed back where everything starts in juvenile. And then the DA's office has to have a hearing before the court to actually waive them to the adult system. So basically that's come full circle for me. From 1995 when I started with the county, that's the way it was. Changed, now it's come back that same way. It is a harder process, and my feeling is that the DA's office may not always agree, but I like it better that way, where they have to start in juvenile and have to find things of why it's better to push them into the adult system, of why we can't still serve them in the juvenile system, which includes Oregon Youth Authority up till age 25. There's a lot more treatment for youth and brain development and things that we need to really look at. So the good thing is we have very few of those cases, Measure 11 and after. So, I'd say we had one a year and then all of a sudden we had one or two a year for a good string of time where the victims were parents of kids too. So that was tough. Any questions on the flow?
It looks like a mixed up Rubik's Cube.
I know, yeah, I started with the one we had and it's like, oh, that doesn't work anymore. So I started moving things around and it's like, it's an interesting process of where things go and how they go back through. And not that, I think we're getting used to the things in terms of when youth fail a diversion where our department just doesn't file the petition. It has to go back to the DA's office. And so, we're looking at those time frames and things and making sure that it's not slowing the system down too much. But it's slowing it down a little bit. It's process stuff. So, but we've Ruby started out as our person. She has quickly moved on. We'll have somebody else now. But it's nice that we're not getting the newest deputy DA. I mean, that's how it's always been, is kind of the low man or woman on the pole. We got them. And so it's somebody fresh out of law school and stuff. But now with the way they've worked it, it should be more seasoned attorneys that we get that will help. So.
I encourage it.
That's good. All right. So as of, we kind of did a snapshot. So June 16th is when I had some time to do all this. So we, between the county and OIA, we have a total of 381 Jackson County youth somewhere in the system. So either and I would actually, there's 433 if you count the current police reports sitting at the DA's office being reviewed. And so it just broke it down between county and OA. So we had 168 intakes. Those are police reports that the DA's office has reviewed or could be some of the citations we haven't processed through yet. Diversion is, for us, they're called formal accountability agreements. It is an agreement between parents, youth, and our department in terms of what they'll do. That does exclude our MIPs of alcohol and marijuana and 110. We had 115 youth on county probation. And then OA had 15 youth on probation in the community, 8 parole youth in the community, and then 33 youth at residential placements throughout the state, and 20 at the youth correctional facility around the state. So all that totals up to that 383 plus the 52 additional ones that the DA's office currently has. This is our filings over petition filings over a 5-year period. We do a lot of data trends, so it goes back 12 years on these things. I do know that I looked a little closer till even after that 2023 is the end of our 3rd quarter. So the last 3 months, we're almost finishing up with that. But we're already over the previous years. We have 182 of the total unduplicated youth and 240 total unduplicated petitions as of right now. And so we're going back a couple of years. With COVID really hit us hard in terms of the number of police reports that were being sent in. And so, everything went down. Our filings, detention admissions, all that. We are surely coming out of COVID in terms of the volumes we're starting to see and the severity of the offenses and more mental health concerns with youth we're seeing on that. Ruby, you want to talk about kind of what the new process is in terms of what you're doing?
Can I go back to the map kind of slide?
You bet. Tell me what you want.
Okay. So prior to January of 2023, under ORS 419C 250, petitions were able to be filed by the juvenile department. We kind of did, we've gone back and forth quite a while on that and whether our office wanted to take over filing the petitions. And one of the things that we looked at is it used to be that under the dependency that DHS could file their own petitions as well. At some point, a defense attorney decided they didn't like that and argued basically that they were practicing law, that the Department of Human Services was practicing law by filing those petitions, and now they can't file petitions. And so we kind of looked, to the future. Is that going to become an issue here in the delinquency side of things? And thought, maybe we just want to start filing our own petitions and not, get to that point where that's going to be an argument. We talked to other counties and kind of took a poll to see what other counties were doing. And most of the other counties that were either our size or larger were filing their own petitions. The thing that we felt that we could do with that is that we can look at those cases for legal sufficiency before they get filed. And a lot of times when in the adult side of things, when we get cases in, we review them, determine, hey, do these need to go back for further investigation to the officer? Or can we just, there's not a crime here, or there are things that we need to see? And that, wasn't happening in the juvenile side of things because we weren't filing the petitions. So this gives us the ability to do that. I'm not saying anything. Joe's team does a great job, but this gives us that ability. So what we decided is kind of a tiered system because, and Joe can really talk more about this, but when you look at their PO intake appointment and review, in that appointment, they do a risk assessment and they determine what kind of risk level this youth has and whether they need the intervention of the court system or whether they could do a diversion or whether they just need, to be talked to and the case can be closed out. So we didn't want to take that ability away because that's a really important piece of work. So we looked at cases and decided there are some cases that we were just going to go ahead and file. There are some cases that we were going to review for aggravating factors. And then there are some cases that we are just going to straight review for legal sufficiency. If they're legally sufficient, then we're just going to send them directly over. So we broke that down. And the way we did that was any A and B person felony crimes, those we would review and file. We aren't going to send those over for risk assessment. We're looking at those. We're saying those are serious. They need to be filed. And we're going to file those. Any sexual offense crimes, firearms crimes, disorderly conduct in the first degree. And these are our cases where they're threatening a school shooting or a bombing or something that relates to some kind of mass violence in a school or public building. And we really want to take a stand on these cases here in Jackson County so that we don't end up we want these kids to know that we're serious and that we don't take these lightly. And then assault in the third degree if they're related to a DUII. Burglary in the first degree if the victim is not a familial relation. And then if it's unlawful use of a weapon, if it involves a firearm or a bladed instrument. Arson in the first and second degree, and then intimidation or bias crimes. So that was kind of a laundry list of crimes that we're going to look at for legal sufficiency, and then we're going to file. They're not going to go over to the juvenile department to look at whether they need to be filed. We take those crimes seriously, and we're going to file those. All other felonies, misdemeanor persons crimes, and reckless burning, we're going to review those again for legal sufficiency. And then we're going to look at aggravating factors in the case and the youth history. And then if we feel like there's a lot of aggravating factors, we may just go ahead and file. And this would be something like, okay, maybe the youth has a bunch of other open cases that are already filed. We're just going to go ahead and file. We're not going to send that over for them to review it first. But otherwise, those cases we're going to send over for review. And a lot of times what we see in those cases, we're going to see a lot of assault threes where they were, aided and abetted by another person where they're school fights. We see a lot of those when they're pretty, there's not a lot of aggravating factors. A lot of those get sent over so they can be reviewed. And then all non-person misdemeanors we review specifically for legal sufficiency. And then we send them over. So that DA review process, we try and get that done. We get a police report in. We're trying to move those out to either get them filed or get them to Joe's team quickly so that they can start their process. Once that happens, if we filed a petition, then it goes through the court process. If it goes to Joe's team, they're going to do their intake assessment. And then they're either going to decide that they can, do something without court intervention. If they can do something without court intervention, either a FAA diversion type of agreement or some kind of informal, discussion, they're going to do that. And then we're not going to get involved again. They're going to send us back a form that says, this is what we're doing. We put that in our system. We close the case out. We're done. If they fail out of that diversion, then they're going to send us back another form that says, hey, they failed out of that and we want you to file the petition. So then we're going to go ahead and file the petition and start through the court process. One of the things that this gives us the ability to do is to have contact with our law enforcement partners. And that way, if we see a report come in that basically says, we have a case here, but I'm saying, look, I need a little bit more information. I want you to go out and interview another witness, or, hey, did you, maybe get a search warrant for something? If we can do that, then we'll send the case back to the law enforcement agency for them to do follow-up. And then they're going to send it back to us so that we can go forward with the case, which is not something that we previously had a lot of control over and ability to do. So far, I think it's working. It is a little bit slower because there's a lot of layers. We have to go back and forth a little bit. But I think that we are getting cases through in a fairly timely manner, and it's working is what I can see. So anybody have any questions on our process? Yeah.
When you say that you're looking for aggravating factors, is that for purpose of sentencing, or is that to waive them to adult court, or what's the purpose?
No, it's really about whether we're going to send it to juvenile for them to do their risk assessment and then possibly do some kind of diversion with them, or whether we're saying no, they need to go through the court process.
So aggravating factors contribute to the process, not like in the adult system, they contribute to sentencing?
No.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So is aggravating factors like an exhaustive list, or is it just generally kind of vague and, how arbitrary is it, I guess what I'm asking?
It's more, it's more just like, we're looking at, do they have other open pending cases? Was it like a really egregious assault?
It's not
Things
aggravating
like that.
factors as a legal term.
No.
Okay.
No. Nope. Things like that.
It's just things that you think make the case worse.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
I don't have a question, I have a comment, and that is really just, I wanted to thank you for all of your openness and willingness to help us with our threat assessment process.
Oh.
That really puts us above the majority of threat assessment teams across the state, that we actually have the DA's office sitting in on that to be able to help us figure out a way forward to prevent those kind of things from happening. So I just wanted to give you that shout out.
Well, thank you.
For
I
that.
appreciate that. Any other questions?
One more, on the, and this might be more for Joe, but the diversions, those are usually like 6 months, 12 months, I'm thinking, because if it goes through and then has to be recharged, the statute of limitations and things like that, so.
There's 6 months, we can extend them for another 6 months, but it does, at that point, it does get a little dicey in terms of if you would actually go back and file.
Oh.
So we look at those.
Any other questions on that? I'll give it back to Joe then.
So let's stop there again in terms of just where we're at. One thing on the far side, you will see our trials. We have very little trials in juvenile court. So our trials are in front of the judge. Majority of the time, things are agreed upon before that. There's a lot that gets set for trial. They're usually all resolved before that. And so, that the F&M is just by male or female, and then, felony or misdemeanor, and then the other would be our violation.
Is the court time still taken up by procedural process stuff for those trials that have been set? Or, so we're going through all the work and it's basically settling right before the trial, or are we, okay.
Yep.
So if more trials went to court, the system couldn't handle more trials? I guess that's what I'm asking.
Correct, yeah. Okay. No, I would agree. And just, petition could have multiple counts, and that's really what those are. And then it's just broken down between felony and misdemeanor. And for ours, on the, what it'll look like on the, through the 16th, we'll have 187 felonies and 218 misdemeanors. So it's quite a big jump on that. But I know Ruby went on vacation, and lo and behold, there came a lot at one time on those. So we'll see what, end of this week, what our finals are for the final quarters. But all of that data is on our website. So we do quarterly reports that end up becoming our annual report, and then that we do 12-year data trends too. So just for us to be able to track that out of kind of what's going on with us. And I'll talk a little bit about the issue of comparing counties to counties or counties to OA and the problems with some of that as well. So this is just another snapshot of placements. So on community supervision, so either diversion or probation, we have 132 kids. OA has 23. Our alternative to detention, we have a community service program, and through July 1st, we've had 1,153 hours that youth have put in lieu of going to detention. And then we've been running an after-school program for several years now, and during the school year, that runs from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. That's a sanctioned alternative to detention that either the court can order him into or probation officers can place him into. And it's really 4 hours of they do some skill building during school time. They can bring in homework. We feed them dinner during that time. And so we had 376 youth. That's a duplicated number, but because some kids will go all 5 days, maybe 2 weeks in a row on those things. And so we really have stressed to our probation staff that they need to do alternatives to detention, especially on the technical PVs. First, they just go to detention. We have a limited number of beds in detention. That helps quite a bit. And then our detention and barriers to bridges residential program, we've had 256 total admissions on 177 youth in detention, 39 admissions on 28 youth in our residential. The residential one looks a little strange because in our data system, we can't have them in 2 locations at a time. So if they're in our residential program and they get moved to detention, they actually get closed out of our residential. And so when they go back, it looks like it's another admission. So that's why it does 39 total. It's a system issue. So we kind of look at the individual youth. And then around the state, and Robert's going to talk a little bit more about this next, but OA residential programs, there's about 250 beds around the state. There's 40 programs, 25 different providers that does that. There are 4 youth correctional or transitional facilities that total 29 beds. So Camp Tillamook, Camp Florence, Riverbend, and then the Young Women's Transitional Program in Lynn Benton has programs. And then the Youth Correctional Facility, which has 447 beds, the largest being McLaren. And then the next would be Rogue Valley in Grants Pass. Those have all been shrunk down over the years, just in terms of bed utilization. A lot less Measure 11 youth that are serving time there has really reduced down. And they're also looking at smaller living units instead of doing 25-bed living units with staffing. If you remember, they had the big riot at the correctional facility years ago where state police came in. They did a bunch of damage, but correct. Yep.
Joe, I have a question on detention. You said we have limited beds. How many beds are we operating in detention now?
Sure. We are staffing 16, and we've set on that probably 4 or 5 years ago. That's been about what our average is. So our staffing is 1 staff to every 8 youth, and so it makes sense to do that versus staffing for 24 like we were, and when we had 13 or 14 kids, because that's still our average is about 13.
And how many beds do you have in each pod?
20. So we have 40 total beds. So, and we used 40 beds when we first moved there, 20 years ago. But just because we have beds don't mean we need to lock up 40 kids at a time.
I do want to tell everybody here, this is to give Joe huge credit. When I first came to the county in 2004, I was the community justice director, and we were just finishing building this building, and we just opened it, and the county handed me the keys, and Joe was the juvenile services. There was 2, you and Carl were there, and the commissioner said, we built it, but we didn't add any money to run it. So figure that out. And Joe pretty much figured it out, and he's kept it going the whole time.
I still remember 3 weeks straight of interviews. It was nightmare. One day is a nightmare for interviews, and that's when we got people to apply. I'll go through our issues with attracting people now, but
Hey Joe, I've got a question.
sure.
What do you do for community service?
I mean, right now, most of it is our landscaping around our building. We do that on Saturday and Sunday. We do a graffiti cleanup.
So there was no impact from the ballot measure in 2020 that did impact your.
No.
It didn't impact community service for adults either. It impacted where, we were requiring them to work without community service work ordered hours.
So
Work release, we had a lot of contracts that we were doing with work release. So it affected some of those.
Robert, you on?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes. Can you see your slide there?
Yes, and sorry, my camera's not working. So I'll do my best here. Am I ready to go?
You are, yes.
All right, so I'm Robert Mountain. I'm the OA field supervisor for the Southern region. So I am the supervisor for the Jackson OA field office. And then I also supervise Josephine. We have an office there. And then we have an office in Klamath that I supervise. And then I supervise the cases out in Lake County as well. So it's a vast region, but the biggest office is in Jackson. So I'm going to speak to those cases and kind of what we're doing for Jackson youth. So I'll just kind of pop into just some of the numbers that kind of Joe talked about. So we currently, for Jackson youth that are in OA custody that was supervised, there was 81 total. So 2 of those youth are DOC youth, and those youth are in the youth correctional facility. Once they are at the age of 25, they'll transition into DOC. But within that population, we have 13 youth currently that are living in the community on probation. So they're living at home, they're engaged in school, they're engaged in programming, and working with the family and engaging them. And then we have 2 youth that are in the foster care system from Jackson. And so our foster care system is similar to DHS. However, it's really meant and geared for the youth that are in our system. And so those homes are qualified as far as dealing with youth in the juvenile system. And then we have 8 youth that are on community parole. So those youth were committed at some point to a youth correctional facility, and then they paroled out into the community. So we have 8 youth currently in Jackson that are paroled out right now. And then as far as the residential programs or placements, we have 33 total youth in Jackson that are placed in residential programs. And we have those programs that are throughout the state. The closest ones that we have is Crimson Rose in Klamath, and that's near the juvenile department, juvenile detention center. And then there's a second program called Turning Point, that's in Josephine County. But those are the closest, but the rest of them are kind of spread around. And we really place those youth at those programs based on, offense-specific needs, the location of their family. We look at the vocational needs, educational opportunities, and then we also really keep in mind of the risk to the overall community when placing those youth. And then the youth correctional facility, we have 20 youth currently from Jackson that are in the correctional facility. Most of those youth have been placed at the Rogue Valley Correctional Facility in Grants Pass, but depending on numbers and also resources and what the kids' needs are, they'll be placed at other places. Let's see. Joe talked a little bit about capacity and our beds. So we have 250 beds that are available. In the residential programs, they're made up. We have a whole bunch of different options. So the biggest population of programs are BRS funded programs, and we have from BRS 5 is kind of the highest service opportunity program, and then it goes down to 4, 3, and 2 depending on the treatment needs. And so we have core residential programs where you will go there and do school, do treatment work, and live at that facility. And then we have proctor care based programs throughout the state that the youth will be at the residential program during the day, and then at night they'll be going to a proctor care or foster care home when they're done with treatment. And we have several independent living programs throughout the state for youth that are 18 and older that are working on vocational skills, higher education, and just adapting into the community from the correctional facility or probation. We also have short-term stabilization programs that are 30 to 90 days throughout the state, and those are for youth that are on parole or probation that are at risk to either getting revoked back to the facility or escalating and services. And we just recently have contracted with quite a few culturally specific programs throughout the state, and then gender specific programs that we have as well. Let's see, Joe, you talked about the correctional facilities are spread out. We have 5 throughout the state, and then 4 transitional facilities as well.
Robert?
Yes.
This is Hilda. I was wondering about those culturally specific programs. If you could share a little bit more, that would be great.
Yes, there's a few up in the metro area. There's the Bailey House. That house is geared towards African American youth. And there's a female program up in Salem. They're just kind of getting started, but they're really good as far as engaging youth from those communities for sure, for resources up there. So as far as the offices that I supervise, Jackson, I have 5 POs that work out of Jackson, and we're right next to the juvenile department in that area. And then one of those POs is a transitional PO, so they do all the vocational transition work with kids coming from the facilities or programs back to the community. And then in Klamath, I have 2 POs that work up there, and then I have 1 in Josephine County, and then I have 2 support staff that do office support stuff for us for the region, and then 2 transport officers. That kind of makes up our whole area as far as those pieces.
Hey, Robert, this is Danny. Jordan, I have a question. On your 5 probation officers in Jackson County, what's the average caseload for each officer? And what's the split between in custody and out of custody for those caseloads?
So Jackson our caseloads are the highest in all of my region. They're running around about 22 cases each PO. And so my other counties, as far as like Josephine counties, it's a lot lower. We got about 11 cases over there, and then Klamath, they're all about 11 or 12. So those are we have a good amount in Jackson as far as cases that we supervise.
And are all those in the community, or any of them in custody?
Yeah, there's a lot in custody. So the numbers as far as in the correctional facility, we have 20 from Jackson that are in the correctional facility, and then in the residential programs we have 33 youth that are in residential programs from Jackson.
So how many? I'm not getting the answer I need yet. How many of those? How many cases in the community do each of those 5 officers have?
Oh, in the community?
Yeah.
So we have, I'd have to break those down, but, so we have, there's 13 of them are on probation, so those are in the community. 8 are on parole in the community, 33 are residential programs. The residential programs are in the community. The only ones that aren't are the correctional facility kids, the 20.
Okay. So for people that are in the community, there are about 11 or 12 cases per officer. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say around that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Joe, did you want me to cover anything else?
It's up to you.
Yeah, I think that was really it. So, as far as the correctional facilities, I can go back to there a little bit. We have 5. The Clarence, the biggest one, and that's in Woodburn. And that's just a male facility for males. And then we have Tillamook in Tillamook, Oregon, and that's going to be a mixed population. We don't have any Jackson kids in Tillamook right now. And then Eastern Oregon is our youth correctional facility in Burns. And then Rogue Valley is the one that's closest to us in Grants Pass. And I'm doing some tours this summer, taking the Jackson Juvenile Judges on the tour on the 27th of July, and then also the Klamath Judges. But anybody from the community, anybody from this community is wanting to take a look at the correctional facility and do a tour of either that and one of the residential programs closer to us in Grants Pass at Turning Point, let me know, and I will accommodate for sure. And then we have the Oak Creek facility in Albany, that's for girls. And then the 4 transition facilities that we have, Camp Tillamook, Riverbend, Florence, and the Young Women's Transition Program, each have kind of different skills that they're working with youth on, vocational training that they have that are really awesome, do really good work. Yeah, I think that's all I got unless there's any questions.
Moving on then. Back to the county. So this is just kind of our framework that we've been working under. So we are a risk-based, data-driven system, meaning that we do a standardized, validated risk assessment on every youth that we see face-to-face. It's a statewide tool. It's been validated several times, and it predicts the likelihood of that youth receiving a additional criminal referral. So not an adjudication, just referral to our department. So part of that happens when you start looking at recidivism rates, and I'll show you the statewide charts and things, but when you start comparing counties to counties or counties to the state average, Medford's, very proactive law enforcement here. So even if they're citing kids and they're coming to us, that's going to cause our recidivism rate to go up versus counties that have cut their police force. Thank you. Where they may not have enough many cops on the road, kids aren't being cited, and so it's not an apples and apples piece. It's just it's one measurement. We've always used that as a standard of public safety, and we really look at our trends. COVID definitely changed our trends because youth weren't being cited during COVID, and it dropped way down. Made it look really good, but as soon as they got out and about, it shot way back up. So.
Joe,
huh?
do we track recidivism from juveniles when they turn 18, or does it stop there?
We're working on it. Our 2 data systems don't talk to each other, but we are working on it. We have an analyst position now within the department, so that is one thing we're going to try to work on. Probably from juveniles aging out to see if they go in. Is that what we're doing? Yeah. Because we have to pick one or the other in terms of those things. So I don't fully understand data sets and things when you pull them together and how they correlate and stuff, but we have somebody that does know. So, yep. And so our risk screen puts kids in categories of low, medium, or high risk. And that would just be the risk of likelihood of having that additional criminal offense. So our low risk kids could be placed on a diversion agreement if there's restitution. If there's no restitution, we're really trying to get them back out into a community agency outside of the juvenile justice system. So they can be back in the community, working on that with their family. Medium risk youth are that discretionary period for our POs where a youth could be placed on a diversion agreement or they could be put on probation, kind of depending on what's going on with the youth and the family. And then our high risk kids, those are youth that are always going to initially start on probation. Some youth go straight from an adjudication straight to OIA at times. The judge makes that decision. That's not always our recommendation, but sometimes it is in terms of just a risk in the community.
Joe, since the DA's office considers things that aggravate the crime, things that aggravate a crime don't necessarily make a youth high risk. So I'm wondering if they choose a youth that doesn't risk assess out as high, but they choose to push them through court system, do you still apply the same you can't apply the same logic. So how does that work between you and the DA's office?
Yeah.
Because really the whole thing around risk-based decision-making is high-risk people should be adjudicated. I mean, you could have a low-risk case with aggravating factors that really, according to the evidence, shouldn't go through that system. So how have you worked that out?
I think we are trying to work it out. I think it's something that we're very aware that the way it's set up, that could happen. And I think we just have the dialogues in terms of what we feel.
We try to communicate on those cases. So those are cases when I look at those and I say, okay, I see, and I'm going to tell you, there are not a whole lot of cases where I've seen what I would say is an aggravating factor that would make me say I'm not going to send it to them, that I'm just going to file it in that kind of middle category. Those are the cases where I'm looking at it and I'm really saying, okay, they already have 3 other open pending petitions, in court. So why would I then send a case to the juvenile department for review when they've already got 3 other petitions that are open in court? Right.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, but that's your logic on how you evaluate who you're going to decide whether you prosecute or not. That may not be the next person's. And if we're actually doing a risk-based system, then that's what should drive the prosecution, not the way someone chooses to handle the case. That's all I'm pointing out and asking how you deal with that.
I think that the idea is that we're communicating on these cases. And so, and that's, in our office, that's the expectation, is that you're going to have these conversations when I'm looking at a case, or when, the person who's doing these cases now is looking at a case saying, I really, should I file on this? They should be contacting the probation office and saying, hey, I think I'm going to file on this, and having that conversation. Because if there is a case where, in my mind, I see, okay, there was, this was a really bad assault, this person was really injured, and they're going to score, I don't know how they score out low risk. There's a public safety issue to the, we have the victim here who deserves to have some kind of justice. And that might not be, to have that person go to another community program or, a public safety concern. So I'm not really sure that, that we're going to see a lot of cases where they're going to be a whole lot different. I think that's going to be a time will tell maybe, and we'll have to work through that and figure that out. This is a new program.
It's the same across all systems, I think, right now, and that's kind of a catch on evidence-based practices is, right. But the thing that I saw in the flow chart that's concerning about the way that is in that case where they're deciding whether they're going to prosecute or not, and even if they're talking to you, in the flow chart, that youth hadn't been risk assessed yet. They were keeping those to make that decision. And it seems to me, even for them, it would be helpful, even when they're going to keep the case, that youth be risk assessed before they decide either way. And in your flow chart, that's not the case for those cases where she decides or whoever comes after her decides they're going to prosecute it.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things that I think we're starting to see is the time that it takes to review those. So now we don't get the police reports at all. So they all go to the DA's office, and so we aren't entering into our JJUS system at all. So the issue with that is while they're being reviewed, if our detention facility gets a call on a youth that may already been charged with an assault 4, there's nothing in our system that shows that. And so we may make the decision on, if it's another assault 4, that they just get released. We're not going to bring them in. And so I think that's something we just started having this conversation about. Maybe when you guys get their police reports, we also get it just so we can get it into the system. And so that helps the after hour piece too. So, I mean, there's some
I
growing
see you're
pains.
working on it. I'm not being judgmental. I'm just asking procedural stuff.
I mean, we can be frank. I mean, we had a whole lot of concerns when it was brought up and when we met, and I think we're slowly working through those. And my big thing is, how long is it going to drag the system out more? And so, we're looking at those and stuff. So I think it's only been, 6 months, and so it hasn't been terrible. So.
Joe, just a question. Is your risk assessment based totally on what you have in data in a record? Or are you considering other information? Because I don't know everything that's on your risk assessment.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is we start with a family questionnaire, and so we've built that on what our assessment is. And so the way they answer those questions, those are actual questions that go back in the risk assessment. So some things around school, in terms of have been suspended or expelled from school, so we can get that actual information from the school, grade-wise. Have they been aggressive at school? How's the home life? Some things that are like, is it the first criminal offense before age 13? So there's some definitely static ones in there. So those will never change through. But the assessment also has a lot of proactive factors. So if they have positive people in their lives and things, that takes away from the negative pieces and it builds it up. And so their risk becomes lower because they have positive things versus just negative friends they hang out with. So, and I'll show you a few of those in terms of the kind of the domains and kind of what they look like as well. We've really been focusing on restorative justice. When I started in 1995, it was the balance approach. It's still the balance approach, restorative justice, to really hold kids accountable, but also repair harm that they've done. And then you have to provide some sort of skill development to teach them new skills so that cycle doesn't continue. So we are fully implementing this in our detention and residential programs. It has been going very well. And then the least restrictive, most appropriate at the right time in terms of services and placement. So not just doing that shotgun approach of trying to get a youth into a program or service, really looking at what they really need and really finding that. And then, having a good continuum of services. So I feel like in our county, we do in terms of be able to do it from diversion all the way up through our own residential program that we run. And then if that doesn't work, then the Oregon Youth Authority or child welfare even. So our probation, so we have 10 probation officers. We have one program manager that supervises them. It's broken down between intake and assessments. So those are our probation staff. They're seeing youth and families. When we get the police reports from the DA's office, they're sitting down with them. They're going through that family questionnaire. They're asking additional information. They do the risk assessment, and then they're going to make a decision in terms of if that youth qualifies for diversion or needs to be going to court based on the risk assessment and what else is going on. Our 4.5 community probation services, our probation officers, those are out in the field, meeting with kids at schools, at home, sometimes employment. And then we have a diversion and some other services position the pieces of people are all through all those things. And then we have 3 office specialists and 1 supervisors that helps deal with all of our data collection in terms of police reports coming in, updates on court documents, things like that as well. This is a 12-year data trend, so the yellows are up through our 3rd quarter this year. The asterisks are COVID. I had to start asterisking things because it threw our statistics way off, and so we are right back up there in terms of the top half part is total referrals. So a youth could come in with multiple referrals or police reports, crimes, and so we've had 410. I think I pulled the other ones too. We have had now through June 16th, 500 youth for 641 crimes. Some youth come in with 1, some come in with quite a few on those things. It's broken down between criminal and non-criminal, so you can see that. But you can see a huge, sorry, I'm walking away from the mic. 11, 12, 2,600 referrals, and I think I said 500. If you do the math, that's about 75% reduction. If you go all the way back to 95, I think it ends up being about a 77% reduction. So that correlates when I came on. So I'm taking full credit for the reduction of crime in Jackson County. It's a trend nationwide in terms of that was definitely the height of crime for juveniles in 95. I'm not sure what was going on, but we had a lot of it. And I think now we're getting to where we're seeing the higher risk kids. Sadly, we're seeing a lot of mental health kids because of lack of services. One of the interesting things on our Q2 this year was the first time that we saw our referrals were 40% female. They've always been about that 25, 30-ish. And most of that was all pretty much assault 3s, where groups of girls would start social media and then they'd meet up somewhere and they all get cited for assault 3, and that drove it way up. And so
has there been any studies on why this is occurring? Because it seems like the trend line for adults is going the opposite direction, right? So the juveniles this, adults doing this, and I wonder if it's what
we do a better job.
Or you just suppress them until you get to be 18.
I really think there's a lot of prevention programs that have been going now. I think that there's restorative justice programs in the schools now. So things that I think historically were just cited and sent to us are now being dealt with within the schools on that. I think that for some part, youth are making some better choices because I don't think you can say they're not because of the numbers. Part of my concern is, even though the numbers are going down, is that the whole mental health piece and what coming out of COVID is going to mean. Because we have a lot of kids that just can't socialize. I mean, they just can't. And putting them into the juvenile justice or the criminal justice system, it doesn't fit them, and they just act out. So I've got some stories for you today of what our last 2 weeks have been in detention too. So let's get through this real quick though. So these are our risk assessments. So we do 2 different. We do an initial, and then our reassessment are for kids that are on probation. So every 6 months we do a reassessment, and the goal is that their risk goes down while they're on probation. And so when we close them out at probation time, that they've left us with a lower risk than when they came in. We're doing very well on that. We're in the 90% of that. The interest piece would be, as the sheriff was saying, is of those that now are off probation, can we track those if they go into the adult system and see what happens too? So this is just breaks down between numbers and percentages through that pieces. So, it's been pretty consistent over all the years in terms of, mid-20s are high risk coming in initially. Majority of the kids are low, although it bounces back between low and medium sometimes on that. And then the probation one's always hard to do because you're going to get a lower percentage of high risk because we're working to reduce the risk down. So they fall to low risk eventually. And so it's not that they're all began as low risk. They all began as pretty much high risk or medium. But they're doing things right in their life in terms of going to school, getting their treatment done, not committing any additional crimes, things like that. So that's the positive we want it to go down to.
Your risk assessments, they evolved and changed over the 12-year trend. I'm assuming that it's been different.
It's been the same tool.
Okay.
It's been adapted a little bit here and there, but I think we're on our 5th validation in terms of and it has a 70% predictability rate, which is a pretty good one.
And then, sorry, follow up that. So then, the reassessments, those are done by their, I'm assuming the intake ones are done by the intake officers, and then the reassessments are done by their personal probation officer
Yep.
that they're working with.
Yeah, and all of our probation staff have gone through additional training where they do inter-rater reliability. So statewide, we do this. They all get on Zoom. They have a case, and then they score it out, and then you see how everybody scores it. And if you're within the normal range, good. If you're high or low, it could be a training piece on that. Yeah, it's evolved in terms of there's help buttons now to how to ask questions differently and things. Just some probation things. So January 1st of 2023, it passed where there was a automatic expunction process. So prior to that, youth actually had to apply for expunction to expunge their juvenile record. In January, it was all non-adjudicated cases once they turned 18. And that would also include if the DA's office filed a petition, but then we decided that youth really could be dealt with in diversion, and then that petition was dismissed. They never went to court. And so on a daily basis, we get printouts of every kid that has turned 18 that's eligible for expunction. And we have 90 days to get that done. And so we're sending notices out to law enforcement on what the information they have. This current legislative session, they just modified it. It's going to include all misdemeanors now, adjudicated and non-adjudicated, when they turn 18. That will increase and this is Danny will love this because this is not an unfunded mandate. They're paying us to do these. So through OIA, so we get, I think it's $208 per expunction to do it. I'm not saying that covers all the costs with what's coming up, but it already had been a workload for us because we weren't able to hire support staff right away. So we only have 3. And we were down 1, and we had 1 that was out on medical here and there. So we are playing catch up on the initial ones. The new ones won't come in until January 1st of 24. So we still have 6 months to really get on that. I think we put on our budget $15,000 for next year as a guess in terms of what that would be. I haven't seen, they talked about the other expunctions of moving it from a 5-year period to a 4-year period. I don't know if that went through or not. There was too many things going on this last week, but that's a possibility too. The E violations for 110, we've had 7. And I just received a call from Rogue Valley Times. They're doing a story on a young person who got a fentanyl E violation and a MIP of marijuana. And he was trying to understand the process. And because the officer was telling him, good thing you had the marijuana, told the parent, good thing she had the marijuana, we can now do something with that because we can't do anything with fentanyl. And even her primary care doctor said the same thing, is that if you would have only had fentanyl, there would have been nothing that would have been done. I let them know that's not quite accurate. It's not a perfect system, but any citation that we would receive, we would do something with it. So what we established when the E violations came out is that we were going to treat those just like an MIP of marijuana or alcohol, because it's really, you get an assessment, you follow through any recommended treatment. However, on E violations, so fentanyl, cocaine, meth, heroin, if you don't do that, that stops it. There's nothing else we can do, nothing else the court can do. For marijuana and alcohol, there's a license suspension. So if they don't follow through on those things, you could get a license suspension. My fear is they're going to take away those license suspensions from us because the harder drugs don't have them. They've tried to do this a couple sessions ago. Because also there's no fines, again, for juveniles. So that $100 fine for fentanyl, or there is none. And so yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. Yeah.
Yeah, and they took away the MIP tobacco too.
Yep.
Recently, last year, I think it was.
Although somebody sent one in and we took it.
It's not really,
I'm not sure.
they weren't really transparent when they did that in the legislature. That was like passed in the middle of the night, I think, or taken out.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, and so, kind of what I've heard is law enforcement is not citing kids a lot for the E violations, because they know there's no consequence other than, I would say a consequence would be going in front of the judge. But the judge can only do so much as well. And if they don't show up for court, there's nothing. I mean, they just get closed. So we will continue to monitor like everybody else.
Statistically, Jackson County has the 3rd highest in the state of E violations issued. Granted, it's not going to be a huge priority because it is kind of interesting if you have a 18-year-old who gets caught with a beer and his fine is more egregious than the kid that's got like 49 fentanyl pills underage. So I think officers feel that dilemma when they're out trying to enforce the law when there's no sense to the law, some aspects of it. Yeah. So I think that's a conflict for some, honestly. And then of course the resource piece, when if there's going to be no follow-up, there is work associated with those as well, and with limited resources for other crimes. You got to make good choices with what you're going to spend your time on.
Yeah, and I know they added fentanyl to the A misdemeanor, but it's a gram and 5. Yeah, basically 5 pills. But yeah, I mean, 4 pills is still going to get an E violation.
Yeah.
Right
so,
there's a soft measure 110's issue.
Yeah.
And that was just done in this session, like just recently.
Yeah. Again, quickly, we are working with Pathfinders. They are now running our after-school program for us, which is our alternative detention. They are doing that. They're also now doing our skills group for probation, and then we're partnering. They're doing a recovery support groups up in detention and our residential program right now. After July 1st, they'll also be assisting with our youth that transition from our residential program. We have to provide 6 months of transitional care, unpaid. And so we're hoping to have mentors to help with that piece too. One of the interesting things on wave boating, traffic boating and game that we've I know talked about before. Our 2 juvenile court judges have decided that those will actually occur in juvenile court, but they will be as circuit court judges. So it's still a waived case, but why make juveniles go over to the other courthouse, see a different judge? This way we can track those a little bit better about if they're occurring or not.
Can I add to that?
Yep.
It's also, it's hard when you have a case like if you had a DUI car crash, so you have an assault, potentially an assault 3 that's gonna stay in juvenile because you can't waive that, and a DUI, and then you have a potential double jeopardy issue because they're going through with the same facts in 2 separate courts and with 2 separate attorneys, and you don't necessarily know what's going on. So this was a way to kind of streamline that so that we can make sure we're not running into double jeopardy issues as well. So that was part of that.
Detention. So this is our staffing. So we have 13 juvenile justice specialists 1, which is our entry level, 3 juvenile justice specialists 2, which is our lead. Technically, we want to have 8 extra help. We don't have 8 extra help. That was one of our hardest areas that we're having to hire right now. And then we have shift supervisors and program managers. I'd mentioned that our staff ratio is 1 to 8, so that's where our 16 beds. Although currently we are staffing additional staff because of the youth that we are currently holding. This is just our population report. In terms of the yellows, the first 3, and you can kind of see all the way down at the end is what our average length of stay. So, you go all the way back to 18, 19 is where we're at 16. And so, to be aware of what the county budgets are. I mean, it doesn't make much sense to have more staff that we don't really need. I think we also got cut at one time, so it made sense. We'll just go there.
That was the sheriff's fault.
Yeah, right. And then it's just by admission reason, and so our main reason still going into detention is probation violations. Although the 41 and 35% for new law violations have gotten a lot closer. Our probation violations were a lot higher. And we're really working on our POs of using some alternatives. So especially around the technical things, the dirty UA, not going to school, not following parents' rules. There's some other things we can be doing with them than just put them in detention on that. And then this is some of our contracted pieces. So we have a 20-hour-a-week mental health counselor. We've been working with SOU on their mental health interns. So we just had 2 that were there for 16 hours each. So we put 1 in residential, 1 in detention. To my understanding, we only had 1 choose this time, but we will work them both sides anyway. We share a LPN through WellPath for medical with our residential program and detention. And then we also have a restorative justice person that we share between our 3 units. Currently, there's a full-time teacher and a full-time aide that Medford School District provides. The CTE STEM classroom, this is new. We've developed this with Medford School District, so it has opportunities for kids to learn things that would be skills out in the real world. So we have screen printing, we have a laser engraver, a CNC machine, 3D printers, and I have not found it yet in all the bills that come out, but I was told it passed where there's additional funding now for detention education programs based on number of classrooms. So now we have officially 2 classrooms, so we should be able to get 2 full-time teachers that 1 can be in the CT classroom, 1 can be in our regular classroom, and we can do smaller groups of kids working in that as well. So there's a lot of coding and things along that. So they've been a great partner. They've gotten a lot of money to do it too. So it's been good. And I just, in terms of I'd mentioned restorative justice and detention and our crisis prevention, our de-escalation piece, that we've seen a drop in our physical restraints by about 63% up in detention. It is edging back up a bit with our mental health kids, because we've also have seen a 30% increase in mental health. And so just over this so June 12th through the 23rd, we had 13 incidents. 8 of those were self-harm or threats to harm themselves. We had 3 youth that tied pants or shirts around their necks, tight enough where we had to cut them off. We had 1 kid that punched himself in the face continuous until he bled. We had a youth that climbed up our outside rec yard like Spider-Man and was going to jump off. We had the same youth that climbed up went up our mezzanine level, second level, was going to jump off the second level there, and 2 kids that were threatening just to kill themselves. We had 1 kid that was taken to the ER room that was initially thought to be maybe a seizure. The best we could find out, it was some sort of mental health break that he had. And then we had 4 youth that were just non-compliant. So those are the kids we normally have had all along. Just say, F you, I'm not going back to my room. You deal with those, not kids that are climbing the walls, trying to jump off or tying things around. So with that, we also we have some vacancies. We have 2 vacant positions, 1 person on medical leave. So that's Josh left, but the sheriff knows this. That's 15 shifts we have to fill just at our minimum staffing level. In addition to that, you throw on, those would be a lot of our extra help staff that aren't trained as well, haven't been there very long. And so we have managers and supervisors working the floor too on trying to keep kids safe. They are tired, and we just continue to bring food into them and try to make it happy that way. I think today's changing a little bit. We're 1 youth's leaving. We're driving him up to Woodburn ourselves because he was committed. So, and I'll skip through the residential program pretty quick. So our residential program is a 10-bed for male youth only. They're all kids on probation. It's an interim step between county and Oregon Youth Authority that we felt was really important. It's our highest level kids, so it's a tough program. We are doing very well. We continue to modify it and make it definitely more into a treatment focused piece. And as long as legislation doesn't continue to change how we do the program, one unfortunate event I'm discovering is that I think you heard maybe Robert say BRS, which is Behavior Rehabilitation Services. So it's a federal Medicaid reimbursement funding. That is what our program is. We are the second highest level of services that you can be. OA and Child Welfare got I believe a $20 million increase to their budgets to provide rate increases to those they contract with. We don't contract with them. We contract with the Oregon Health Authority, who got 0. So we got to try to figure out why we're not getting the rate increase dealing with the same kids just because we're a county agency on that. We did all the work of the study, but we'll have to see on that. So numbers a lot less just because, you're looking at 10 kids. It's a 6-month program. And so in theory, if they all go through, that's 20 kids a year. But 20 kids less to go farther into the system. Youth in this program can have jobs as long as it doesn't interfere with treatment and school. So we've had youth that have had part-time jobs in the evenings and weekends as well. So same things. Medford School District provides their schooling program too. They much more treatment focused, so they are required for 11 hours per week of individual or group skill building or counseling services. And we're still waiting for our accreditation. We turned that in on I think the 19th of June, and so we're still waiting on that. One thing that will come out of that is that we'll be doing more performance measurement tracking, not only in the program, but for all juvenile division as well, ensuring that we can track how well things are going or not. So you guys saw the juvenile crime plan that it brought a couple months ago. The juvenile crime prevention and basic diversion fundings through the Oregon Youth Authority. That's our biggest. That's $500,000. That really funds our mental health services, our medical services, 3 detention staff, our 1 probation officer that does our sex offense intensive program. And so that plan doesn't have to go by this board. It just gets done and sent in. It's a little newer this year, but it follows the same prevention one. And then, as I mentioned, our performance and quality improvement plan that we're kind of looking at on each of those areas, and then kind of what our recruitment and staffing currently is. Yes?
Joe, where's the residential program located?
It's in our building, upstairs. Yep. It's one of the 4 pods. I told you I talked recidivism. That's a lot of stuff. And I don't know why they turn white when I move them. We're at 28.7. We were at 21.3 in COVID. But again, you have less contact with law enforcement. That's what drives our recidivism, really. I don't think that's terrible. I think it's one measure. I'd like to get out a couple more years to see how it's going to be on that. The state average is what, 26.4. It went up some too on that, but it's one thing to look at. I like our reduction of risk level a whole lot better. Yeah. Thank you for this extra 6 minutes.
No, I have an announcement. So thank you everyone for hanging out through here, because I've been waiting to tell you this so you don't hear it in the news first. This morning, our Board of Commissioners authorized us to proceed with preparing for a future ballot, a new jail again. So we kind of haven't done that for a while. It was stated in a public meeting this morning, so I assume it's going to be in the paper, and it's probably not going to be explained correctly. So I'm going to just explain that. We're working off the prior proposal, which needs to be updated. The main thing with the prior proposal, and when you create a service district, is you have to do what's called a feasibility study. That feasibility study will be to update the capital project itself, so we'll be going out for an RFP to do that. Once we get the updated capital project, we'll also, from that updated facility, update the operating budget. Then we'll take those 2 things and tie a tax rate to that. We talked about some other potential ways of offering to fund it besides just permanent tax rate limit. And I do want you to know that this is likely not to go to the ballot until 2025. May would be the earliest, but it's probably going to be later than that. And the reason for that is obviously, in order for us to get it to a ballot and figure out if it's feasible or not, we have to go get all the cities again to agree to participate in it, which I think is going to be a tougher sell. Just so you know, when we proposed the last time, it was a $170 million capital project, but over 20 years it was $1 billion in revenue to build and operate it. So the jail itself was $100 million of that, which was 10%. So the cost to build and run a new jail is not building it, the capital, it's the operating it over time. That cost roughly today, which was $170 million 3 years ago, is $280 to $300 million. So that's an even tougher sell than we had 3 years ago, and we told people every time we wait to do this, it's going to get more expensive. I wish I was wrong about that. I wish it would get way cheaper, but it's not likely to. And likely the proposed operating budget we had last time didn't include 20 to 30% increases in utilities and huge increases in staffing, medical, all those kinds of costs. So food. So we're going to be doing that, but we're going down the road of bringing it back to our board to actually go through the formal processes of referring Measure to try to get a new jail built. So
Is the location the same?
Yep. That will be the location, probably, just because of all the needs of a facility like that, and co-locating facility needs. You know, even after I'm dead and gone, if we haven't built a jail by then, that's going to remain the jail site. So 100 years from now, your kids will say, that jail site's been there a long time. Hopefully we get a jail built. I don't know if anybody has any questions. I'm willing to answer them. This wasn't on the agenda, so I can't really get into a discussion and debate about it, but I just wanted everyone to hear it from us because I'm sure the paper's going to not tell exactly what we agreed to do. It requires a formal process of our board referring it. They didn't do that today. They just authorized staff to prepare everything to bring back to them to do. Thanks.
Does anybody else have any updates before we adjourn? Great, appreciate your time. We'll see you next month.
Thank you.